Good morning. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Bernstein, and I'm the president and CEO here at the New York Botanical Garden, and it is such a pleasure to welcome all of you to Ross Hall today with our speaker, Tom Balsley. The New York Botanical Garden is located on the ancestral homeland of the Lenape, Delaware people. We honor them and acknowledge their displacement, dispossession, and continued presence. Today's lecture kicks off NYBG's 24th annual Winter Lecture Series. Yes, yeah, round of applause, sure. It's really a beloved time of year here at the Garden. From skyline to shoreline, imaginative waterfronts of New York City is the title of this year's series, which celebrates three distinguished individuals who have contributed to New York City green spaces through innovative designs that exhibit a remarkable convergence of art, nature, narrative, and community. Special thanks to Susan Cohen, coordinator of the Landscape Design Certificate, who curated this year's season. Thank you, Susan. In addition to today's lecture, we have two upcoming events in the Winter Lecture Series, so please mark your calendars. On February 22nd, we will welcome Wari Price to discuss the formation of the Battery Conservancy and the transformation of the Battery into an urban oasis at the southern tip of Manhattan. And then on March 28th, we will welcome Signe Nielsen to reflect on the development of Little Island at the intersection of nature, art, and community on the Hudson River waterfront. Now, I am thrilled to welcome Tom Balsley, a renowned designer whose New York City-based practice is best known for its fusion of landscape and urbanism in public parks, waterfronts, and plazas throughout the United States and beyond. For more than 35 years, Tom has worked to reshape spaces, completing more than 100 parks and plazas in New York City alone. A noted speaker, he has taught and lectured at the Harvard Graduate School of Design and Penn Design. Tom is also a dual winner of the ASLA's Honor Award in 2014 and 2019, and was selected for a special exhibition at MoMA in 2023. Hunters Point South Park, the main subject of today's lecture, was once a barren post-industrial site. Through Tom's passion, creativity, and leadership, this park now embraces the shoreline along the East River and provides a unique waterfront experience for visitors and locals alike. As many of you know, here at NYBG, we work to promote and protect plant life throughout the world and to bring nature to New York City through programs like Bronx Green Up and our new urban conservation program, which is being headed by Dr. Eric Sanderson. The resilience of cities like New York will depend on the development of places like Hunters Point South Park and the vision of people like Tom Balsley. Time permitting, Tom will end the talk with a short Q&A on stage, so please save your questions for the end, and also please silence your cell phone so that we may enjoy the lecture all together. Now, please join me in giving a warm garden welcome to Tom Balsley. Tom?
Thank you so much. So pleased to be here, and thank you for the invitation. It's always wonderful to have a chance to pass on some experiences that might be helpful for those of you who are interested in the subject of improving the quality of our lives and our environment, and also a chance to show off a little bit, admittedly. So in a special thanks to Susan Cohen, who offered the invitation, and of course, when she did, I said, well, what would you like it to be focused on? And she said, well, Tom, your work has been so impactful in the city, and I said, thank you for that. And she said, really think about what you've done that you can share with us that has had that impact. And of course, Hunters Point South Park is the one, maybe the best I've ever done in terms of checking all those boxes. But I wanted to share with you today what impactful means to me as a landscape architect practicing in New York. because when you think about it, I mean, you could go to other places in the city. You could even have conversations with people in the city and say you're a landscape architect, and they say, well, where do you ever get a chance to do that? You know, there aren't that many green spaces, but in fact, there are so many spaces in our public realm that really contribute to the quality of life that we have here in the city. And I've been very much focused on those. So forgive me, I'm going to just go through. First, I want to introduce you to us. For 50 years, we were Thomas Balsley Associates, a studio practicing our work mostly in the US, but also across the country and abroad. And then about 7 years ago, I was invited to join SWA, and we became SWA Balsley. And SWA is the largest landscape architecture firm in the United States, and I mean a pure landscape architecture firm, not architecture, engineering, all those things. So we're very proud to be part of SWA. We share the same ethos, and we continue as SWA Balsley doing the same kind of work we did in the past, but with a deeper bench, you might say. So just these are our core values that we share. And a lot of what we do is informed by the research and the striving for innovation, finding other ways to achieve the goals we set for ourselves. It's all been captured in publications, including a monograph on my work called Uncommon Ground, that's at the MoMA bookstore, I believe. And it's a very collaborative practice. If we're taking on a project that maybe requires a little bit more than our experience, our studio's experience offers, we can go to the other studios and get those resources from other studios. So it builds a collaboration where we travel to each other's studios and work together. And that all adds up to my approach to design, which is a collaborative approach. And I always use special math by saying 1 + 1 = 3. And it really does produce work that either one of the individuals might never have encountered. We are all over the place, from San Francisco and Texas and over in the Middle East, doing a lot of work in China. And our studio here, these are just some of the stats on our studio here in the city. We're proud of the numbers, but we're even prouder of the quality of the work. Just a peek at some of my credentials, my personal credentials. I'm most proud of the ASLA National Design Medal. There's only a few who've ever received it, and I happily have it on the shelf in my home. This is an important part I want to share with you. I know that we have a group that's very horticulturally based, but I know you also care about public space and the public nature of civic life in that space. We're a very people-centric design firm. We believe in integrating environment and horticulture in with social and cultural issues. And so we sort of measure the success of our work by with these kinds of photographs. When we go out to those spaces, is it a vibrant space? Is it working? Is it common ground for a community, a diverse community? Is it common ground for a community that may be in the midst of gentrification? These are the ways we measure our success, as well as the quality of the materials and the perspective and the beauty of it. So I wanted to talk about, just very briefly, what is impactful? What can a landscape architect do in the city that is impactful beyond those spaces that we're all familiar with? Well, Central Park is pretty impactful, and now our waterfront parks are pretty impactful, and we're all proud of those. But let's remember that a healthy community, a healthy city, really depends on a broad portfolio of open space to really serve its citizens. And that ranges from small little spaces in the densest part of the city where we can get away. You know those spaces that we see in Europe, and we all say, oh, that was so wonderful. Well, we deserve those spaces in our cities in the US and here in New York. And then there's the neighborhood parks, and there's the community parks, and all these other parks at different scales, different types, that all add up to an open space system that's serving a city. Well, the city back in the early 60s, maybe the city commissioner, I forgot who it was, fell in love with their experience in Europe with these small little spaces and said, why can't New York do that? Well, why can't we do it in Manhattan? Because you can't afford to buy a little piece of land like that in the middle of Manhattan. So the idea was, well, why don't we have the developers who are building those towers just push their towers back a little bit. I'm going to oversimplify this a little bit, but it's incentive zoning, it's called, and create a little plaza and let them build it and let them be responsible for it. But every one of those towers that comes up, or most of them, could bring those small little spaces to within 2 or 3 blocks of where we work and live. These are impactful spaces. These are touching our daily lives. If you took a poll of people in New York street and said, when's the last time you were in Central Park? It might be a matter of months or last year or something like that. But what is touching your daily life? It can be little spaces like these that we just stop in, we meet our neighbors, we have our coffee. These are called POPs, privately owned public spaces. And currently, those are just a few of them that we've done in Manhattan. Currently, all the POPs in Manhattan add up to almost 95 acres of spaces like this. All right, I'm going to be truthful. Half of them don't look like this. They didn't turn out so well. But the other half, even if it was just the half, adding this to that life experience, that walking experience in Manhattan has made an extraordinary difference. And I am proud to have done over 60 of them in Manhattan. I'm even proud to point out the one on the upper left is called Balsley Park on 57th Street. So I'm really in it, as you can see. And this is just a glimpse of, you get a feeling from these images, the kind of life we're trying to bring to the city and to the streets. So there's a lot of spaces in the city that could have been impactful but failed. They didn't think about it carefully enough. And the one in the upper left-hand corner, that's Balsley Park. Before we got our hands into it, that was what they called a park on the corner of 57th Street and 10th Avenue. We redesigned it, and fortunately for me personally and my family and my wife and my kids, it's now called Balsley Park, and we're all happy about that. But it really changed that neighborhood and that community sense of a place where they could gather. And it shows how we can bring our work, our hardscape work, our horticultural work, our thinking about socializing and cultural aspects, bring it all together into a space and really impact that community. We did the same thing for Cleveland. Upper right-hand corner, I guess you figured out that's the before shot. But again, these dramatic transformations, using what we see, how we've studied spaces, and being able to transform this neighborhood in Cleveland. This is the prototype in Cleveland that started an entire new open space system throughout the city that's spread to their waterfront parks now. And it was because we took such a sort of progressive, contemporary approach to transforming this space into the one you see is what started that all. These are just a few images of life there. And as we do these spaces, as I talked about, it's studying people. If any of you know about William White, I studied William White. He was a sociologist that wrote a book about the life of small spaces in the city, in New York. And he taught us all how to look at things differently. And that's what I've done ever since throughout my career. And so just take a simple question like, well, how can I make this park more interesting for people to use in different ways? How can I bring people together? What can I do to do that? Well, I can tell you it's not a lunchtime concert. That's not going to do it. It's something more built into the design of that park. And so just take a bench, a park bench. What does it ask you to do? It asks you to sit in one position and look in a certain direction. And if you went to the turn of the century parks like maybe Madison Square Park, let's say, you know, the people would 100 years ago or 150 years ago walk by in their parasol, they'd nod to each other with their top hat. That was the culture of recreation 100 years ago or 150 years ago. Not now. We use spaces differently now. We're slovenly, if you will. So I asked the question, what could I bring from our homes that has passed the test of time of being something that really fosters a sense of closeness of family? And so think about your family room, and what is the object in your family room that does that? Well, I say it's that coffee table. Rarely does it ever have coffee on it, but it serves a lot of purposes, doesn't it? Now, why can't a coffee table be brought out into a public space and serve the same purpose? So here's just some of my sketches and just a diagram to show you. Introduce a simple footstool, coffee table, a place to sit and get even closer in a more intimate conversation with someone than your couch side to side or from the chair across the way. The introduction of that simple object into that space, into that recipe, if you will, completely changes and expands the dynamics of the way in which the space can succeed. So, before I show you Hunters Point South Park, I wanted to show you Riverside Park South. It is as impactful on the west side as Hunters Point South Park is on the east side. It was a train yard. It is just connected to Riverside Park. Remember, Riverside Park South is 73rd Street to 59th Street. Riverside Park starts from 72nd Street and moves north. So these are images of Riverside Park in its various forms, because originally it was Olmsted, and then I forgot the name of the designer, but then it was Hooverville along the edge of the water you see, and then it became the highway. But all the community groups, all the nonprofit groups stopped him. And they actually, with our participation, they actually helped offer an alternative plan. And the alternative plan was, through a lot of public process and through working through a lot of different agencies, this is how complicated this can be, a plan to actually lower the highway, not to do the big dig like they did in Boston, God forbid, but to lower the highway just down to the ground, the lower level of that site, which was about 30 feet lower than the west side streets, and just cover it, put it in a tunnel, and cover it, and let the West Siders be able to walk down to their river. God, that's so simple. Well, not really. It takes money. In fact, it was so simple that here on the right side, this is the kind of the model of that plan. You see the highway going into the tunnel, then the tunnel wraps around this way, and then it's all park. But just before city planning would approve it, they said, wait a minute, you don't have the money to do the highway. And we're not sure you're ever going to get the money to do the highway. So you've got to do an alternative plan, or let's call it an interim plan, which is the park with the highway still there. That's what we see out there in the west side now. Some of you may live on the west side and go there and enjoy it. This is the cross section that shows you, okay, with the highway elevated, we would build a park here and then an upper park, and that's the way it would be. Except that we have now placed tunnels. As we build this, we've placed tunnels, empty tunnels here, waiting for this day when that highway can be taken down and threaded through these tunnels. Can you see this? And the West Siders just move right down to the waterfront. I still believe that's going to happen. It should have happened a couple times ago when they had, shovel-ready projects, etc. But it's going to happen. In the meantime, there's an extraordinary park we've done for the west side with a highway still in place. Here you see gives you a good view of the tunnels. Here's one of the tunnels. And now we're doing the upper part of this park. It's going to cover this for now, but the tunnel's there waiting for us to finish off this beautiful park. This is not easy work, this kind of landscape architecture. It requires all kinds of agencies, civil engineering, waterfront engineering, et cetera, et cetera. What we wanted to make sure we did, though, was we wanted to celebrate the rich history of this site, the railroad history of it. We wanted it to be always a reminder of anyone who came there. We wanted to keep the gantries that you see, that you see here, loaded the boxcars onto rail barges and moved them across to Jersey and then off to the rest of the world. These are important sites in terms of the growth of New York, and we wanted to celebrate these sites. And so we kept as much of that, we created reminders of that as we were developing these spaces, including this 900-foot long pier all the way out into the river. We transformed it into this pedestrian pier. When you're at the tip of that pier, it's like you're in a submarine conning tower. It's extraordinary. So the park has now touched the lives of the West Siders almost to a fault, because they're almost saying, who cares if the highway's there or not? This is fine. And we didn't want that to happen, but it's good because we're not sure about the highway. Just some views. These are some views from the upper part of the park looking over, and then it drops down this 30 feet to that lower waterfront portion. Okay, now we're at the east side. Now we're on the East River. It's 1993. We start doing a master plan vision for this site that Hunters Point South Park is part of. So this site goes from here, and it's called Annabelle Basin, all the way down to Newtown Creek, of course the East River, UN building here. And these are all the rail lines that are coming through and go down under the river, and the highways coming in here. It's loaded with infrastructure. And this portion is called Gantry Plaza North, Gantry Plaza State Park, that was finished in 1998. This was finished in 2010. As I said, the master plan was in 1993. And then we waited. Do you remember they were going to have the Olympic Village site here when we were in pursuit of the Olympics? That got remaster planned into, let's do this as all affordable housing and redo the park as a park that serves the upland community as well as that community. So that became Hunters Point South Park. Again, this is not easy work. Look at how complicated this site is. For starters, this was all, believe it or not, on the west side of the East River, historically, going all the way back to the maps, that was marshland. You couldn't put a marsh there now because the river is so strong. Why is it strong? Because they probably narrowed the East River's width by 50% at least. So a combination of the flow of the river, it's not really a river, by the way, it's an estuary, but the tides coming in and out and down, the more they narrowed it, the stronger those tides became. So with that kind of flow, you can't have a marsh with that kind of flow. It's got to be a little bit more gentle. But I wanted to point that out because ultimately we were convinced that we wanted to celebrate not only the industrial history of this site, which was just as rich in railroads as the one over on the west side, but also the natural history of the site, which was marsh, and I'll show you how that turned out. So this was the first project we did. This project won every award in the world as a sort of a new paradigm for urban waterfront parks. Why? Because it wasn't a typical bulkheaded out at the pier head line like, say, Battery Park City was with landfilling. No, it didn't landfill. In fact, it couldn't landfill because of Battery Park City or the West Side Highway tried to do that, and they were stopped in the federal and in the state and federal courts. So we had to live with the existing shoreline and create a development
affordable housing development and a waterfront park that lived within those shorelines. And we wanted to celebrate the history and the culture of this place, but also do it in very 21st century language and culture terms. So we are, this is what this looked like before, and this is what it looks like now. At every pier that was there, we transformed every pier into what the New York Times critic called marine follies, instead of just a place for a fishing pole. And of course, that's how we approach things. No, this is not just a bench with a fishing pole. What else can we do with it to make it more? In this case, these are double width lounge chairs that face the sun or allow you to view the stars. And there's not a single light on this pier, so it's all kept free for stargazing if you want to go out there and do that. And of course, then there was that famous storm that came to visit. This was Sandy. All of this was underwater. This is all background to our approach to Hunters Point South Park once we got our sort of teeth into that. So this was a huge success in the Long Island City community. They were totally against this whole development. And this is what we call the healing grounds, because they so embraced this park that they created the Friends of Gantry Plaza State Park. They hated the development, but they created the Friends of Gantry Plaza State Park, and its membership was made up of the upland community, blue-collar, a full mix, but very strongly blue-collar workers, but also the new residents were coming in. So this park became that common ground for them, and that's important in our work, is how do we build those community connections to each other and to their place. And that's what Gantry Plaza did, and we used it as a model as we moved into the design work for Hunters Point South. Just some images. Restoring the rails, restoring applying what we thought was the native planting that might have been on that site. We had no irrigation, so it was all native planting, and it had to be rugged, and all the detailing had to be rugged. Number one, to kind of express the railroad activity, the muscular railroad activity that took place there, but also it was the first park on this whole shoreline. As people went down there was going to be a lot of use and abuse. And so we wanted to make sure the park could withstand those early throngs of people exploring their way into the park and down to the river. Just a view from the rail garden, and of course the gantries was such an important component in bringing those boxcars to rail barges and off to the rest of the world. So that was left, and we spent $2 million restoring the gantries instead of knocking them down. It was that kind of commitment to a very holistic approach to the experience of the park for people. Even Monty included us in his 80 gardens around the world. That was kind of thrilling that they would select an urban garden like this to be included in that. And this is, when you create a space like this, you know, Queens and Long Island City, finally they get that space that they can go to and feel, instead of feeling like second-class citizens to the Manhattan skyline, guess what? We get to look at your skyline. You have to look at us. So, and we're looking west, we see sunsets and you don't. And you know, I'm making a lot of this up, but. Okay, Hunters Point South. It's an extraordinary park. I want to first give credit to the team. It's ourselves as Thomas Balsley Associates, SWA Balsley, with Weissman Frady, the architects, and Arup, the engineers. And I want to make a point of just dwelling on that a second, because when we take on parks like this that are going to take on these issues of climate change and all of the challenges of gentrification, all of that, it really takes, you have to get out of your silo. You have to recognize that you don't know everything, and you really have to begin to open your heart and your minds to a full-blown collaboration. And that's what our three firms did with this. Yes, we're the park designers, but it was such an important collaboration that in a way we are all part of the outcome. So I wanted to make sure that you all understood that. This site had these huge landfills, about 40 feet. I mean, this is, Long Island City is flat. Queens is flat, for that matter. But there were these two massive landfills. Where did they come from? Well, they came from the excavation for the Midtown Tunnel. And then they were just left there. And so, well, if we're doing this park and there's going to be a whole development behind it, I guess we got to get rid of that stuff. But no, the team walked to the top of that hill and we said, there's nothing like this in Queens. You can see up and down the river. Why would we want to get rid of this? Let's leverage this topography, man-made, admittedly, but let's leverage this topography and let it become a major component in the park. And I'll show you how that worked. Because the park, whether it was flat or elevated, had extraordinary views of the Manhattan skyline. You could almost not be able to take your eyes off it. I remember when I had my first visit with the New York Times design critic, he was going to write an article. I kept trying to point out certain details, that I'd worked so hard doing, and he was just standing there staring at the skyline. I almost had to do this to him. It's so seductive. I hope you'll go out and experience that. Also, we had to face the climate change. We knew from experience that flooding was going to be a real issue. We knew we had a responsibility to address that issue for this community, existing community, and for the new community we were planning. And so we took note of that level of flooding and incorporated that into our approach. And we also took note of the natural history of the site of the marsh, and took note of that it was a flyway. The East River is a major flyway, and we thought if there's any way we can get a marsh back into this story, we want to try to do that. Now, my wife, Sarah, who's here today, when she saw this diagram above, she thought I was a madman and she was going to have me sent to an institution. But let me tell you, you see that form? Oh, come on, Tom. Okay. You see that oval there? There it is. You see this line doing this? There it is. See this? This is an overlook. There it is. See this? This was an island. There it was. I wasn't crazy. This is, I'm not going to say this is the design process, because you would say, why bother going to Harvard or any other school if you can just scribble like that and then get it built? But sometimes it does come right down to that sketching and this motion and this movement, and it's all getting synthesized in your mind, and it's coming out through that hand, or these days more like the mouse. And it's a good example of how it can actually be realized into a real park plan that then's realized into a real park. And this just gives you an idea of the kind of infrastructure that was beneath it, all these, the tunnel, etc. It's all coming together. We're starting to think about a marsh along this edge. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. And here you can see that oval, the overlook. This is very early in the process, but a stage we go through. And then ultimately, this is an overlay, a diagram of the aerial now of the park. And here we are up at the very northern end of the park. Gantry Plaza State Park is right there. So we're a continuation of Gantry Plaza State Park. Then we come down to the more active part of our park, and then we get into this park. And here you see the marsh, and we have tide channels and infiltration areas. We created a bioswale. If you all know what a bioswale is, that's moving along the entire length of this boulevard, where we had to fight with DOT to say, listen, we don't need a sidewalk on this boulevard. We have a walkway in this park. Let's use that area for the sidewalk that you had intended for the sidewalk, turn it into a whole bioswale where we can filter all of the surface water from the streets in this boulevard into this bioswale and filter it and clean it so it's not going off into the storm system of the city. And they finally agreed. We have to design this park, of course, when it's dry, but how about for the various storm levels? And finally, the 100-year storm. We have to have these areas that we know are going to flood. They're going to flood. We're going to invite that flooding in. We want to catch it. We want to absorb it. And then we want to release it. And halfway through the construction of this park, Sandy came and tested this area here, the whole green area. It was under almost 2.5 feet of water. It left, and not a bit of damage to the park. So it did its job. This is the park, the overhead view of the park. Getting around fall time, we have all the little blue stem grasses on the slope. You can see the marsh, the overlook, the little island that we've created, and not little island, sorry, tiny island, the tiny island that we've created. And it comes all the way around. And these are sites ready for the affordable housing, which is now, most of it's up. Huh? Okay. So this was the level part of the site that didn't have the landfill and was closest, by the way, to the subway connections, is where we decided this would be the active portion of this park. And we wanted to create one big open space, common lawn area where people could maybe kick a soccer ball, have events. Multi-purpose space is really important in the work that we do. So we did that. And I'll just explain to you that originally it was going to be all lawn, a beautiful lawn oval, and that would have been that. But we had a planning commissioner that insisted that it be all lawn, and a parks commissioner insisted that it be all artificial turf, because it was going to there's a high school across the street, and it was just going to get beat up. And so ultimately, they sent us a little thing through the email that showed the oval with a rectangle of artificial turf in the middle of the oval. Can you imagine? But we got creative, and we said, we're going to put an oval in the middle of an oval, or along the edge of the oval, and then we're going to elevate the natural lawn so no one can ever kick a ball on it. You can always be sure that you can picnic on there, yoga on there, whatever you want to do. That's the natural turf, and this is the oval where this community meets, and the images, the videos of the way they share this space. There could be a time when there's 100 or 150 people out there with their kids, with their grandmothers, using it, sharing this space, and really demonstrating to us all, doesn't matter what walk of life we come from, we can all get along and share these spaces. And it's such a democratic symbol to me as I go to the park each year. Just some examples of that. Here, high school's out here, they're kicking the soccer ball. This is their gym, period. This is just a quiet Sunday afternoon. Here we are, the same thing. Maybe it's families out there. And then Bernie Sanders thinks that he can come out here and have a rally out here. So it's ready to be anything for anyone. We often say we're building stages sometimes in these spaces. And here's that bioswale, a piece of that bioswale that continues all the way along. Now we're moving into what we call the vestibules. Well, think about if you're about 80 years old and you want to go down to the park, you shouldn't have to go walk all the way to the edge of the park. Sometimes you just want to sit in the edge of the park, watch people come and go, look at the park, see the river you don't want to overcommit. And that's what these vestibules are all about. There's one at every entrance. It gives you a nice, comfortable seat where you can actually be part of the park, but a little bit apart from it. And then there are these custom-designed double-width lounge seats. We made the tops wide enough because we know from our social observations that we're all perchers. Did you ever notice sometimes you just want to sit on the top of the bench the back of the bench. It's kind of why. It's not more comfortable, but we just like to get up. And there you go, there's an example of that. And this is the rails that came through, we converted that into a rail garden. And so that's there, and that's flanked by a dog run and a play area. Looking from above, you get a better sense of the composition. Here's that rail garden going through, the dog run, the play area, the green, the lawn. This is a big pavilion building that's got a little cafe, restrooms, parks department, and then a whole terrace here because the ferry, the water taxi comes here, and this is a pretty busy spot. And then there was originally, on that old industrial site that I showed you, there was actually some kind of grassroots groups that brought some sand in, bottles of beer, and played volleyball. We paid homage to them, and we gave them a volleyball court. And so there's their beach volleyball out there. If you've never done it, you should try silent disco. It is fun. And here's just an overview of the play area, the dog run, and the urban beach. And then the notion of this overlook, well, we have to leverage this topographic, this landfill. And so we bring this thing out to the top of it. It's unfurling from the oval. If you look at that plan, there was a series of paths that just unfurl from that oval. Either they're going down to the water or around the corner or up to the overlook. They're all part of that system and knitted together that way. And here's, of course, the view of the overlook. And as we were selling it to our client, we said this will be the most sought after wedding photo location in New York. I don't have the data on that, but I think it's pretty popular. The making of the marsh is important because, as I mentioned, the currents. So we start with this idea that, well, we're going to have to engineer some protection if we're going to have a marsh back there. Okay, so we'll engineer a protection, but we all know what those riprap engineered protections look like. But there's nothing to say the top of it and the inside edge of it can't be green. Well, that was pretty revolutionary to the engineers, but they say, well, I guess you're right. Okay, fine. We're getting there. Now, there's nothing to say how wide the top of it has to be. This is the most important part of it, that front leading edge. So we insisted that the width of that revetment, you might call it in engineering terms, is wide enough to get a path through there with little sitting areas. Why? Because we wanted to give people this opportunity to get close to the water and be removed from the world and just be trapped in this dialogue between marsh and that little blue stem slope and the river and the skyline. And I can tell you it's such a magical experience on that walkway. If I want to do a critique of of a decision we made, I purposely made it 4 feet wide and no wider. Parks Department, of course, wanted it to be 8 feet wide for vehicles to drive, and I said, please, please let it be a trail and not a path. And then we insisted that it be angular rather than those sweeping curves. It was departing from that. Why? Because we wanted people to slow down and move and shifting perspectives and just take themselves to a different world. Now, it's so popular that we have collisions between strollers and runners and et cetera. And we're working with Parks Department now to widen some of the intersections and do something to relieve that kind of congestion. But I'm almost happy that there's congestion because it really does slow people down and they all meet each other and say hi. So we're very proud of this engineered, if you will, soft engineering, we'll call it, marsh. And this is what it looks like today. It's almost like you never even see the riprap revetment. It all just disappears. And this is it under construction. And a few more images of what that's like to kind of move around here and along that edge. We're going to widen some areas here to make it a little bit easier, but it's still hugely successful. Now, the making of Tiny Island. And I'll just tell you one thing. I want to go on record. This was our idea first. And I'm sticking to it. This is the island, and it is an island, although it had to be the marsh behind it here. At high tide, this is all water, but we had to have some protection for this marsh as well. So when it's low tide, it looks, well, wait a minute, that's not an island, but it is. It's a marsh. We're walking across, and I checked with everybody. It's a marsh. This is the making of the marsh. So what we started with here, and this was all, again, railroad paraphernalia, if you will, along the edge. And that whole thing was reshaped, cut down, reformed. Here we are making it. The water, as you see, the high tide is in here behind it. And then this is going to be that area with the bridge. And that would have been, okay, looking at it upside down here. This marsh is now coming around and continuing here. And here's the walkway. And then we created this crescent for this wonderful, very intimate space where you can come up a little bit higher, look out over the marsh. And this is an art project. We collaborated with the artist on this. It's the 7 stages of the moon, spheres that are sunken into the ground with a phosphorescent, I think I'm saying that right, phosphorescent coating that captures each one of the stages of the moon. And at night, that coating glows in the evening when you go out there at night. So you go there and those portions of those spheres are glowing, and then there's this light coming up. It's just, and there's no other light pole out there. So it's, again, one of those magical places. You know, you might say, oh my God, this has got to be a dangerous place, no lights. But you know, if you create a space that is so popular, people are out there all hours of the day and evening, that's 90% of the safety. And so we've been able to eliminate light poles from some of those areas. And then finally, there's the other landfill site, and of course, there's the overlook hanging off from its edge just behind these trees. But this is the rest of that whole landfill. It's what we call the promontory. It's an important pivot point in the park because when you're up here, you're looking, the East River does a very sharp turn downriver towards the Brooklyn Bridge in the, what's the other bridge? Yes. So this gives you a view not only of the skyline, but looking downriver. And we took this as an open lawn promontory, but we created these family rafts, wide enough for 4 or 5 people to have their picnic, and people come to them first before they lie on the lawn. And then this is the blue stem slope that's coming down into the marsh. So this is a very important and a very attractive portion of the park. I guess you can see, there's one of the rafts. By the way, they get that summer solstice light through down 34th Street, right into the park. There might be 50 people with long lenses out there on the slope taking photographs of that moment. So we never even thought of that. It just happened. We set the stage and it happened. So this kind of captures everything for me. It's a park path in this park. It's got nature touching your arms, your legs, hopefully no ticks. And it's wide enough or it's narrow enough, it kind of forces us to slow down and say hi to our neighbors instead of passing by them in the fast lane. It's everything we try to do. And of course, if you're a landscape architect, to be invited to be on exhibit in MoMA for 23 was wonderful for us. There were, I think, 6 projects, but we made the cover. just a couple more things, one sec. This project was so successful that the deputy mayor of Rotterdam, that would be Netherlands, where all the great designers of the world are, the Dutch designers are the greatest in the world. So they think. The deputy mayor called us and told us that he had just visited Hunters Point South, and he had to have us do a park for them in downtown Rotterdam. And so this is the park we're doing in Rotterdam for them, and it's called Nelson Mandela Park. And I'm not going to get into the details, but I'll tell you this, in New York or in the US, you cannot fill into water, I don't care if it's a dead harbor, you cannot fill into water. It's just the rule. You can't do it. We're filling into the harbor here. Because it requires a balance. This entire neighborhood is surrounded by immigrant housing and not even affordable. It's all the old worker housing from the harbor that then transformed slowly into immigrant housing. And Rotterdam is a huge immigrant city. And they're claiming, we don't have any parks, we don't have any parks. You can't build a park for them a half a mile away and say that's where you're going to take your kid for a bike ride. It's like you say in real estate, location, location, location. And so the city said, we have these unused harbors. And why don't we just fill in the inner area of that and create a new 10-acre park for this community without any compromise to the environment or any kind of a marine activity that might happen. So that's what we're doing here. And it was so successful that they asked, you may know of a person called Michael van Valkenburg. They asked him, my friend, to come in and do the same thing in that harbor. So there are going to be 2 harbor parks in Rotterdam designed by 2 New York landscape architects, and we're very proud of that. Thank you. Thank you.
So on behalf of the New York Botanical Garden, I want to extend a very special thanks to Tom Bosley for kicking off our 2024 Winter Lecture Series, celebrating New York's green spaces and obviously the influence we're now having on other cities as well. Please come back to hear about the other little island that we're going to be covering as well. And just a reminder too that if you're here today, we have a special offer with both the Pine Tree Cafe and also the Hudson Garden Grill if you want to get additional time in the garden. I know it's not the most beautiful day, but actually it's quite nice sometimes to see the garden in the rain. So thank you so much for coming and hope to see you again.